Ever wonder what it costs to live in Japan, especially in this day and age with inflation hitting a record high in 38 years? Well, you're in luck because today I'm going to break down what you need to know about living in Japan. Whether you're planning to move, visit, or just curious to know, it's good to stick around and see how much that will cost your wallet in the long run. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Akuna and I'm a Nigerian living here in Japan. Basically, I just talk about my experiences living in Japan and everything about life as a foreigner in Japan. So I made a similar video in 2022, that would be 2.5 years ago, and judging from the way things have been from then till now, there has been a lot of change in the prices of commodities, consumer goods and the rest of it. I mean, there has been inflation on the rise, especially since the beginning of 2022. So stick around and find out how things have really changed. So let's start with the basics. Rent. So real estate has seen a very high increase in prices over the years in Japan, and the cost of rent for an average person in Tohoku region, which is where I live. So this video is going to be based on my own experiences and also what I've heard from other people, but mostly centered around what it will cost a single person to live in Japan on a monthly basis. So for me and my household, which is a family of 4, we pay roughly 30,000 yen monthly for where we live, and this is a 3DK. So this means 3 rooms, dining and kitchen. So in my case, there is no living room, but I had to convert 1 room to a living room. So paying 30,000 yen, you might consider this cheap because most 1K rooms or studio apartments in this area cost a little higher than that. But this is a municipal housing. So in this case, the government is determining the price of the building I am living in because it belongs to the government. So in this case, you're being judged based on your income. But the average price for a 1K, that's a 1 room and a kitchen apartment, would be anywhere between 35 to 45,000 yen in Tohoku region. But if you're moving to places in bigger cities like Tokyo, Osaka, you're most likely to pay up to 50,000 yen or more, especially with the cost of inflation going really high. But luckily, for those who are students, if you're planning to live in the school dormitory, the prices haven't changed since I came here, and that's encouraging, so to say, because what I paid in 2018 is what people are still paying up till now, which is fair enough to students. But if you're planning to live outside of the school dormitory, then you have to buckle up and feed your wallet, fatten your wallet because you're most likely to pay higher. But also on the other end, due to the rising aging population in Japan and numerous deaths, recently the government have been giving out houses for free in rural areas, in countrysides. These are called akiya. And these houses can go as low as 0. That's what I mean. I mean 0 yen. Some houses are being given out for free because the government feels this would attract people to invest or to, build up the communities in those places due to the decreasing population in those places. So yeah, you could get houses for free. You could search on the internet, free akiya houses in the prefecture you want to look at. And some houses can go as low as $2,000. That's how cheap it is at the moment. But interestingly, some of these houses are very old and, dilapidated. So you're basically paying for the land. And in most cases, you might have to tear down the building and build yours or renovate. And this renovation can cost you anywhere 2 to 3 times the cost of purchasing the building. And if you didn't pay for the land or the building, then that means you're building a house anew. So this is the current situation of things at the moment. But for those of us in the city, the prices could go anywhere from 40,000 yen to 70,000 yen for a 1K room, a 1 room and kitchen apartment. And then the next thing would be food. So this is purely relative. For me, food is literally about 40% of my monthly expenses, and I have a family of 4. And every week we budget about 15,000 yen on groceries. And mind you, these groceries are just your perishables, your beverages, spices, 1 or 2 things. They don't even really cover the cost of the main raw food items. So in my case, I think I've said this previously, I don't have a very adventurous taste bud. So I mostly stick around African food, and this can be very expensive. So this 15,000 yen weekly does not include the African food items which I order from Tokyo. So those ones are typically very expensive, and then I have to pay for shipping and the rest of it. So if I have to calculate in a month, I spend, give or take, 80,000 yen on just feeding. Sometimes it can be lower, especially if I have a lot of raw food items at home, and then I just, bulk cook and the rest of it, which is what I typically do. I cook over the weekends and then store them in the fridge. So, but yeah, sometimes it could be less, sometimes it could be high, but it's typically somewhere between 60 to 80 or 60 to 75. So if you're planning to live here, it's it's advisable that you cook if you want to save a lot of money. But if you don't have the capacity or you don't like to cook, I mean, you can also eat out, but that will cost you more. So for a single person, you could be spending maybe give or take 40,000 yen monthly, depending on how much you eat, how much you cook at home, or how much you eat out. So just bear that in mind. But if you're eating local food, the Japanese meals, I think it's most likely to be cheaper for you than when you're trying to find your home country food or other country foods that you like. And then the next thing is transportation. So typically, most Japanese ride bicycles, so the cost of transportation for some people might be low. So if you're someone who likes to ride bicycles, I think that's a very good option. Luckily, Japan has a very good road network. It's very accessible and the rest of it. So you're most likely in luck. If you're planning to use the trains and the buses, I typically use a commuter pass card. So this card is known as the Ixka card. So you have different commuter cards across Japan, the Suica and the rest of it. And on a monthly basis, I recharge my card for 12,330 yen. And this covers 2 train lines and bus. So where I live, you have the north to south and east to west train lines. So I can use this for that. And then you have the bus. So for the bus, we have 2 different kinds of buses, the red and the blue buses. For the blue buses, this is the city bus, and my card covers anywhere you go in the blue bus. But for the red buses, I have to pay whatever the fare is at the moment. But this is a discount for students. That's why it's that cheap. So if you're not a student, your transportation is most likely to be very expensive. If I do not have this card, then going to the university to and fro might cost me over 1,500 yen. If you calculate that on a weekly basis and then it's a monthly basis, it's way above the 12,330 yen. So for transportation, I would say it's not very cheap, so to say. So you just have to figure out how to cut down your cost of transportation. And then for people who would like to drive a car, there are other things you have to bear in mind. The cost of gasoline. So in recent times, the cost of gasoline has been rising. I think that's a worldwide issue at the moment. For where I live in Tohoku region, we pay about 174 yen per liter. And then you have to factor in things like the car tax. So you pay the car tax annually. So it depends on the kind of car you have. Some people have K cars, which are typically small engine cars, and they could pay anywhere between 10 to 15,000 yen. And then those who have bigger cars with bigger engine capacity can pay up to 30,000 yen. So it all depends on the size of the car. You also have to factor in things like parking. So where I live, we have a parking lot and we pay 4,000 yen to park the car monthly. So this is like the most affordable you could get. Because if you decide to park in other parking garages, you're going to be paying as much as probably 200 yen per hour. That's for overnight. The charge typically from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. cheaper, and then 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. higher. So it's up to you to figure out if you're going to live in an apartment that has a parking lot, if you're going to buy a car, if you're going to ride a bicycle. And buying a car also comes with extra costs. You also have to pay for the car insurance. Typically, that also depends on the insurance company you're looking at and the options available. So for us, we have a relatively moderate sized car. It's not considered a K in this case. It has a larger engine capacity, and we pay about 5,000 yen monthly for car insurance. Also, after every 2 years, you have to do the car inspection documentation. So this could cost you about 70 to 120, 130,000 yen, depending on the size of the car. So this is just to renew the documents for your car and certify that your car is good to go. So you have to factor in all these costs, the tax, the cost of petrol, the parking cost, the insurance, and all this, to know if it is worth having a car or not. But yeah, in some cases, a car is a necessity if you have to access so many places, able to move around and be mobile when needed. And then moving on to utilities. So I will start with water. So for where I live, water is typically 5,500 yen to 6,000 yen. So in the summer, I pay higher because you're using a lot of water, but the prices are usually fixed. I think that's because this is a municipal housing, so you have a fixed range for water. It's typically 5,200 yen, but then any additional thing could range from 300 to extra 1,000 yen. So yeah, in the summer I pay up to 6,000 yen for a family of 4, and then in the winter I pay less than that, probably 5,700, 5,600 yen. But when I was living in the dormitory, I paid way less. I was paying somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 yen, and this is probably what most people would pay. But also some houses would come with the water bill attached to the rent. So when you pay for the rent, it automatically covers your water bill. So it's not pay as you use like I do in my case. And in the case of gas, so for the cooking gas, I typically pay 3,000 yen. I think cooking gas is relatively cheap in Japan, if I say so myself. I use the gas for cooking, and I cook a whole lot. I bulk cook most of the times, and then I use it also to run hot water in the bathroom. And in Japan, you have the city gas and the LP gas. So I think the prices also differ depending on which one you're using. But for me, in my case, I'm using the city gas, and this is what I pay. Also, when I was in the school dormitory, I was paying about 1,000 to 2,000 a yen per month for gas. So all this is dependent on how much gas you use and where you live. So in some places, if you're using a shared facility where you're either sharing the bathroom or you're sharing the kitchen, the prices will fluctuate, of course, depending on how many people use it and how it is shared amongst the tenants. So that's that for gas. And then when you move on to things like electricity, for electricity, that's literally the second highest bill I have after food. But the prices differ depending on the season. So during the summer months, I pay way less. So I could pay anywhere between 7 to 10,000 yen. And then now autumn/winter, the price is really on the high side. I could pay anywhere from 17 to 20,000 yen. It's typically worse in January, where you have a long Christmas and New Year holiday. So I spend about 10 days at home, and then of course you're with your family, you're heating up the whole house, and then the electricity bill really skyrockets. And I think there's been a change in the rates, how they calculate the electricity bill recently. So the prices have been on the increase generally for everybody. Probably people who live as single persons in their households might be spending about 7,000 yen or 5,000 yen per month, depending on how much things you're using and the rest of it. But for large families, you're running a lot of amenities, so your prices would typically go up. And then the next is the internet. So for the internet, I use a broadband, and it has a fixed price of about 4,000 yen. This also increased in recent times. This was not the price when I got it, but of course in Japan everything is on the increase. Prices of things are skyrocketing. Actually, inflation has been on a significant rise, and the Japanese yen has been falling greatly. So it's been really affecting the spending capability of many Japanese people, and even many surveys have shown that people are beginning to spend less because of this. Just 4 days ago, I saw the news that the prices of goods will rise significantly between January and April next year. So we are buckling up for that because no one knows what to expect. For the mobile phone, this depends on your option. So for me, I pay about 6,000 yen for my mobile phone. So this is all up to you. It depends on the company you join and what options you add on. So for some people, you have 10 minutes free call time. So for some people, you have 5 gig. If you have 5 gig, of course, your bill will be lesser. If you have 50 gig, your bill will be higher. So it all depends on you. I also pay for things like entertainment, which would be my Netflix. In this case, I pay about 1,900 yen monthly, and this is also a recent increase. People also have other things they add. If you're somebody who dines out, goes to entertainment places, and the rest of it, you're most likely to spend more. Next bill that comes for me is typically the health insurance. For the health insurance, it's judged based on your income. So no two health insurance calculations are the same. It all depends on how much you're earning and the rest of it. So for me, there's been a significant increase in my health insurance from the last time I made the last video till now. It has actually tripled. Yes. So the last time I made the video, I think I was paying about 5,000 yen monthly. Now I'm paying about 14,000 yen monthly for my health insurance. And as a family of 4, we're paying roughly 40,000 yen. And that's because the kids, their bills are very little. But I think for health insurance, I would always say it's a reasonable investment, especially when you have kids as well, because you don't want to be caught unawares when you go to the hospital. Because when you go to the hospital, the government pays 70% and you pay 30%. And then still speaking on if you have kids, you have to factor in things like your childcare fees. It's also dependent on your income, except you're using a private facility. But if you're using a public government-owned facility, they judge it based on your income. So the childcare fees have differed widely for me. In a year, I can get 3 different bills, sometimes 2, because they review it, I think, 3 times in a year. And so the prices differ. That's based on the number of terms or semesters if it's in the university. But this is only for kids aged 0 to 18. That's kids between kindergarten to senior high school. Yeah, for the university, the prices are fixed. It has nothing to do with your income. So in my case, there is a time I paid 0 yen, and there is a time I paid 23,000 yen monthly. Yeah, that's how crazy it's been for me. So it all depends on how your income changes during the year. So if you earned so much last year, be ready to pay so much next year. And then if you earn less next year, be ready to pay less in 2 years' time. So that's how the whole thing is factored in. So just bear that in mind. But typically, if you have more kids, there is a discount system that makes, the fees cheaper for one child, and then things like that. So they find a way to balance it. It's also a way to encourage people to have more children. But that doesn't really work out in most cases. And also, if you have two kids below the age of 6, the prices are typically very low. But once one gets into the elementary school, I think the person in a kindergarten or nursery school, the prices go up. So it happened to me in my case when I had two kids below 6. The prices were relatively okay, but once the first went into elementary school, I saw the price for the younger one go way up. So now I don't know, it's just difficult to pinpoint how much exactly the fees are, because this is purely based on your income. And then other things to look out for is the tax. So the tax system in Japan can be quite overwhelming at times. So for me, I pay residence tax, and this can be somewhere between 30 to 35,000 yen. I think the last I've been paying is 34,000 yen. This is calculated based on your income as well. And then you have the income tax. If you're earning income, your company or whatever institution you're working for can always deduct the income tax, or you have to go to the government at the end of the year and file your income tax. So that's all dependent on you. And you also have the pension scheme, which is also dependent on your company, and they find a way to deduct that from your income. So typically, most of the things in Japan have been on the rise. That's just the truth. Compared to 2022 and now, we've seen a lot of rise in cost of livelihood, and basic commodities, even things like rice, are beginning to look like a luxury for some people, because the cost has been rising. This year alone, I think in June or so, there was a lot of rice scarcity in Japan, and people complained a lot. So it was really bad at some point. But the funny thing in all of this is that, just like they say in my place, Aladeroma Burundense, which means that no matter how bad the situation is, there are people who gain from it. So this is for those who are probably touring Japan, visitors, or those who are planning to move but are coming from a country with a stronger currency, like those coming from America, from the UK, from Europe, which have stronger currencies than Japan. So with the Japanese yen weakening, you're at an advantage. Actually, this year, Japan saw a record high number of visitors, especially from these countries. This year alone, as at June, they had almost 18 million visitors in Japan. If it continues in that trajectory, that means by the end of the year, this year would have the highest number of visitors, especially since COVID times. Pre-COVID 2019, they had around 32 million visitors in 2019. So let's see how this year goes. I mean, the holiday season is coming, so more visitors are expected. But people have spent a lot more yen, not a lot more USD or euro or pounds, a lot more yen, because the value of yen is weak. So you spend very little dollars, and then it translates to very big money in the Japanese yen. So if you're coming from those countries, this might be a good time for you to visit Japan. I see a lot of videos of people saying, oh, I went to Japan with an empty box, and then I came back with a box full of things. Well, now you know the cost of living in Japan. So if you're looking at moving to Japan or just visiting here, it's up to you to make your decision. But also bear in mind that smaller cities will make you spend lesser, and bigger cities will make you spend bigger. So it's all about the choices you make. And if you're planning to study in Japan, probably next year, and you're wondering if I find a part-time job, will the income from this job be able to sustain me in the long run? Well, stick around and find out in the next video, where I give you a breakdown on how much people earn as part-time workers and if you can sustain them as students. Thank you, and don't forget to hit the like button, share, and subscribe to this video.